Why Leonor's marriage could break Spain. LLLL. A young woman stands beneath chandeliers that have watched empires thin and thicken with time. The marble floor reflects centuries of discipline. Every step is measured. Every pause is observed. She is Princess Leonor de Borbón y Ortiz, heir apparent to a constitutional monarchy that survived exile, dictatorship, restoration, and modern doubt. Her posture is studied because the institution demands it. Her silence is trained because continuity depends on restraint. In Spain, a future queen does not marry for herself alone, she marries for history, unity, and the fragile balance of a nation. The Spanish crown is not sustained by affection. It is sustained by acceptance. A quiet, collective agreement that this figure, standing still under the weight of symbols, remains useful to the state. Marriage, here, is not romance. It is architecture. The public sees a young heir growing into visibility. The institution sees something else entirely. A future junction. A moment where private choice intersects with constitutional memory. Spain has lived through moments when that intersection shattered trust. The scars remain visible in law, in ceremony, in what is never said aloud. Continuity is not abstract here, it is embodied in visible presence, regulated behavior, and carefully limited freedom. At first glance, the idea that one marriage could destabilize a modern European nation seems exaggerated. Spain has a parliament, a constitution, an electorate accustomed to disagreement. And yet, this assumption misunderstands the monarchy's function. The crown does not govern. It stabilizes. It absorbs pressure so the political system does not fracture under it. At around 2 minutes, the quiet question emerges, not spoken, but unavoidable. What if the stabilizing symbol becomes the source of tension? Because the crown is strongest when it is predictable. When it reflects national identity without provoking debate. Marriage disrupts that equilibrium by introducing an uncontrollable variable, another person, another background, another set of loyalties, interpretations, and projections. The Spanish Constitution requires neutrality, but perception rarely respects legal text. A consort is never neutral in the public imagination. They are read, interpreted, accepted or resisted as a proxy for broader fears. History teaches this with precision. Foreign alliances once dragged Spain into wars it did not choose. Domestic marriages once reinforced unity, or accelerated division. This is the living thread of continuity, and it is fragile. At 5 minutes, the phrase returns, heavier now with implication. Because the gamble is not whether Leonor marries. It is whom she marries, when she marries, and what Spain believes that choice represents. In the United States, the monarchy is watched less as a governing force and more as a stability indicator. Markets, diplomacy, and alliance culture read institutional calm as reliability. A controversial royal marriage would not dominate headlines for long, but it would be noted, filed away, and remembered. In the United Kingdom, the sensitivity is sharper. They understand this territory. They have seen how marital choices ripple outward, reshaping public trust in the crown itself. They know how quickly symbolism becomes liability. Canada and Australia, constitutional monarchies by inheritance, read Spanish stability as confirmation that the model still functions in the 21st century. If Spain wavers, questions echo farther than Madrid. Germany, with its historical skepticism toward monarchy, observes differently. Not emotionally, but structurally. As a case study in whether inherited authority can still coexist with democratic legitimacy. Back in Spain, the deeper issue remains deliberately unspoken. The monarchy no longer has the margin for error it once enjoyed. Public patience has narrowed. Tolerance for perceived privilege has thinned. At around 8 minutes, the deeper mystery settles in. There is no public courtship. No visible candidate. No narrative offered for reassurance. Silence, here, is strategy, but it is also risk. Because silence invites projection, and projection breeds division. The institution knows this. That is why preparation is relentless. Military education, public service training, language mastery, all designed to make the future queen legible, credible, unassailable. Marriage disrupts legibility. At 10 minutes, tension tightens. A midpoint thought, never spoken aloud inside the palace walls, but present nonetheless. What if no option satisfies the institution? A foreign partner invites questions of allegiance. A domestic partner invites scrutiny of class, power, and favoritism. A non-traditional choice invites ideological backlash. Delay invites speculation about readiness, confidence, or control. There is no neutral path. Only managed risk. At 14 minutes, the point of no return appears, not as an event, but as an inevitability. At some point, absence of decision becomes a decision itself. And the longer the question remains open, the more the institution carries unresolved weight. This is where systems matter more than personalities. The crown cannot appear reactive. It must appear inevitable. Marriage must look like continuity, not concession. Spain's regional identities complicate this further. Catalonia, the Basque country, Andalusia, each reads symbolism differently. What reassures one audience unsettles another. National identity is woven into these rituals, and no single thread can dominate without strain. By 19 minutes, a future threat takes shape, safely foreshadowed, never named outright. If the monarchy becomes a site of cultural conflict rather than consensus, its protective function erodes. And once eroded, it cannot easily be rebuilt. This is not about scandal. It is about legitimacy, a resource more finite than power, and far harder to restore once depleted. The phrase now sounds less dramatic, more clinical. Because the gamble is structural. A calculated risk undertaken not for love, but for survival. In the final moments, the image returns to the young woman beneath the chandeliers. Still composed, still silent, carrying a future that has not yet chosen its shape. The institution waits, the nation watches, and history, as always, remains unfinished. The room is quieter now. Not because the pressure has eased, but because attention has narrowed. Walls that once displayed certainty now absorb calculation. Spain's monarchy has entered the phase it knows best, containment. At this stage, the danger is no longer hypothetical. It is procedural. Princess Leonor de Borbón y Ortiz is no longer being prepared for a future decision. She is being prepared to survive the consequences of one. The crown understands something the public often forgets. Institutions do not collapse from rebellion alone. They weaken from friction, small, repeated stresses that quietly erode consent. Marriage is one of those stresses. Not because it shocks, but because it invites interpretation. Spain's monarchy exists by constitutional permission, not divine assumption. It survives because it is useful, a symbolic anchor above partisan struggle. The moment that usefulness is questioned, even subtly, the ground begins to shift. This is the second, more dangerous phase. Not the choice itself, but the reaction to it. Every possible outcome now carries a cost that cannot be paid up front. Only deferred. A partner perceived as foreign does not threaten Spain. Legally, it threatens it symbolically. Questions surface about influence, alignment, and cultural distance. None need to be proven. Suspicion alone is sufficient to weaken authority. A partner perceived as domestic does not resolve this. It reframes it. Concerns shift to class, access, advantage, and favoritism. The monarchy becomes visible in places it prefers to remain abstract. And visibility is risk. By this point, the institution's internal language changes. The word, love, disappears. The word, fit, replaces it. Fit is not emotional compatibility. Fit is survivability within ritual, silence, and constraint. Fit is the ability to exist beside power without bending it. This is where the comparison quietly emerges in foreign capitals. In the United Kingdom, analysts remember how modern marriages forced the crown to explain itself, repeatedly. Each explanation chipped away at mystique. Each defense made the institution sound ordinary. And ordinary institutions are replaceable. In the United States, observers frame it differently. They ask whether Spain's monarchy can still function as a stabilizer in a polarized era. A controversial marriage would not dominate foreign policy, but it would alter confidence. Confidence moves faster than law. Canada and Australia watch through inheritance. Their constitutional connection to monarchy is already abstract. Spain serves as proof that symbolism can still unify, or as warning that it can fracture. Germany watches as a structural experiment. Not with nostalgia, with calculation. Does inherited legitimacy still outperform elected symbolism in moments of stress? At this stage, the deeper institutional anxiety becomes unavoidable. The monarchy no longer controls the narrative environment the way it once did. Silence used to project dignity. Now, silence creates speculation. Every public appearance is dissected. Every gesture is archived. Absence becomes a message. The longer the marriage question remains unresolved, the more it becomes a vessel for unrelated discontent. Economic frustration, regional resentment, generational skepticism. This is how institutions lose control, not through opposition, but through accumulation. By the midpoint of this second act, something subtle but critical occurs. The crown stops asking, what is the right decision? And starts asking, which decision fails slowest? That shift matters, because slow failure allows adaptation. It buys time, it preserves options, but it also signals that the margin for success has narrowed. At this stage, advisors focus less on approval and more on containment. Which audiences must be reassured first? Which can be delayed? Which will never be satisfied? Regional perception becomes central. Catalonia does not read marriage through romance. It reads it through power alignment. The Basque country through autonomy. Andalusia through continuity and tradition. No single choice stabilizes all three. The monarchy understands that legitimacy today is modular. Fragmented. Maintained in parts rather than as a whole. This is the point where continuity is no longer automatic. It must be actively defended. And defense creates visibility. At this moment, the phrase returns, quieter but heavier. Because the gamble is no longer about breaking Spain in one dramatic moment. It is about whether Spain slowly stops agreeing that the crown still holds the center. The future threat is not revolution. It is irrelevance. A monarchy that must constantly explain itself becomes a monarchy that competes with politics instead of rising above it. Once that line is crossed, the institution has already changed, even if the constitution has not. The cameras will eventually capture a decision. A name, a face beside the air. But the real outcome will be measured later, in opinion that hardens quietly, in tolerance that shortens, in debates that no longer defer automatically. The chandeliers remain, the rituals continue, the posture holds, but beneath the surface, Spain stands at a familiar edge, where continuity is still possible, but no longer guaranteed, and the silence that once protected the crown, now waits to see what it will cost.